Hello, everyone. My name's Sarah Hale, and I'm the marketing specialist at TouchPlan. Today, our webinar is going to focus on how to create project flow, your schedules while you're late. While we give everyone a couple more minutes to hop on, I do want to let you all know that you may hear TouchPlan referred to during this presentation. If you're interested in learning more about the platform, we do have a couple of options for you. One is our on-demand webinar or on-demand demos, which is a video walkthrough of TouchPlan. We have one geared towards general contractors and one geared towards specialty contractors, so be sure to check those out. We also host a live demo every month. And finally, if you're interested in actually getting your hands on the platform, we do offer a free trial as well. Last but not least, if you do have any questions that come up during this webinar, please feel free to drop those in the question box on the right-hand side of your screen, and we will be sure to get to those at the end. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to Andrew and Wayne, and I'll let y'all handle it from here.
Sounds good. I'll go first, Wayne. I'll supposed to say the best for second. I'm Andrew Pyland. I'm a product manager at TouchPlan. Came from construction, superintendent, primarily with a commercial GC, building mostly data centers. And I really fell in love with Last Planner and building production systems because I came from a manufacturing background before construction. And when I came to the job site looking at it from a manufacturing standpoint, a lot of things didn't make sense, but I was able to start making sense of things with Last Planner system and then applying principles like tax, which we'll talk about later. But that's me. Excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Hi, everybody. I'm Wayne Lott, one of the founders of Lott Brothers Construction Company. Like I'm just one of the brothers, so that's a pretty simple way to describe it. We've been in business for over 30 years. My brother Dave and I started out in the business with our father in the late 60s and 70s, and so we've seen a lot of transitions over the years, and I've tried to take advantage of what we learned, and looking forward to sharing it with everybody today.
Excellent.
So this is a slide that I think depicts a lot of what's everyone has identified or noticed over the last decades: the decline in construction, production, productivity, scheduling, efficiencies, and something I wrote a thesis back in the 70s, and my professor developed a lot of this data at University of Texas. And then there was a recent paper at IGLC that extended and added more documentation, all very consistent with the trend that since the 70s we've been going reducing or declining in our production. This is actually just the percent direct work, which is more of a measure of management efficiency than it is productivity. It's just scans or observations of how many people actually hands-on tools working, not trying to take advantage of walk-in or things that are necessary, but just hands-on tools. And it's consistently declined till now. The going average is between 30 and 40%. And another study listed below here, if you want to reference it, was done by a master's thesis at University of Texas on 3 of our projects: a school, a hospital, and a multifamily project, all of them with over 12,000 observations, ranked up at about 51% and direct work. The interesting thing about the chart, though, is that the decline from the 70s and the 80s, 2 major things happened. We began subcontracting almost all of our labor, and which we thought was a good thing because we were struggling so much with the unions. We thought being closer to piecework would be a great thing. And then about that time, we got personal computers, Microsoft Project and Primavera became available. And so everything began to run focused on scheduled dates, not production rates.
Okay, and Wayne, from your perspective, I mean, looking at this, yeah, I'm seeing we're, what, roughly 35–40% of the time that any one person spends on a job site, they're actually adding value to the project. And to summarize what you're saying, it's that it's not so much the trades are less productive or not as good as what they used to do. It's that as managers, we're increasingly more inefficient.
Well, yeah, we are, and we're struggling with the subcontractor silos are so hard to break through. The trade partners are focused on so many other things that it really is a struggle for the project management team.
Yeah, and by going to that more of a subcontractor model instead of the kind of the old school general contractor model, we created intra-organizational silos where it's already tough enough to get one organization online going in the same direction. It's completely a different thing to get multiple organizations, different colored hard hats moving in the same direction. So we might have solved one problem, but created another one, and it might have been bigger than the problem we had before.
Exactly.
All right. And then on the computer side, so you think we've been kind of like the way I see this is you're advocating that we're looking at scheduling too closely. You said it perfectly. I think that we're managing schedules and not building for production, and not it's about scheduled dates, not production rates. And we've kind of
the CPM is a good way to tie contractually down to completion date, and that our contracts are written around it, and so now everybody's looking. But from a subcontractor perspective, if he gets a bigger crew or waits to start the crew, needing a bigger space and want to move in and finish a big area, his whole area, in a shorter time, to him, he's met his contract.
right.
But for us, for the rest of the project, we're waiting on him to turn that area over.
Yeah.
And
So we've gone to bigger batch sizes.
Yes.
And it's more better for subcontractors, but maybe not as good for the rest of the job. And the other thing I wanted to highlight too, it sounds like with managing the schedule itself, as construction managers, we've sort of become captivated by this magic light box in front of us, and somewhat mistaken our ability to manipulate a schedule and get a good warm fuzzy feeling about what the critical path is telling us. We've been chasing that instead of you're really looking at the job site from a perspective of how do we maximize production rates.
Right.
And it's sort of a false sense of security when our critical path schedule tells us that we're going to hit the right date, and we're not looking at our production rates to make that same conclusion.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. Well, I wholeheartedly agree with everything you said. I just wanted to capture it.
And me with you.
Yeah, and I thought this was really funny, Wayne, when we were building this slide deck. You threw this out there, and this is in an office setting, but I've certainly seen this on a job site more than once, where somebody knows that it's not necessary, they're not going to hit supposedly their promise because they know the person, they're going to be waiting on somebody else to do that, and so they kind of back off a little bit and then say, when it comes time, when they get pressure put on them, they kind of, everybody kind of goes like this, they're like, well, hey, that guy's not done, or that crew's not done, they're in my way, I'm not gonna hit my date. And then it just kind of starts to the circle.
Well, it does. Yeah, everybody, and even specifically, we call it ambushes for our trade partner subcontractor meetings, weekly meetings, is that the project manager or somebody shows up from the subcontractors that hadn't been out there in a week, looks around, says, finds 3 or 4 things that are in his way, and it just ends up in a yelling match with the superintendent. So and we titled it Theory of Constraint. So really what happens is every trade partner becomes a bottleneck himself.
Right. And this isn't to point to say that trade contractors are the problem here. I mean, ultimately what we're pointing at is that our method of management, our shift in management to managing a schedule vice planning production, is what is causing this. That the contract structure is such that it's more beneficial for a trade contractor to have a larger area to produce bigger batches, which is ultimately detrimental to the job and everyone's sanity. But really, we as construction managers have created this.
Exactly. We've defined success the wrong way.
Exactly. Cool. Yeah, I really like this cartoon. I thought that was pretty funny. And you built this no flow circle. I think this is the first time the world's seen it. Tell us a little bit about it.
Well, we were trying to explain or just talk about why a trade partner is delayed or what begins the delay. And I said, well, we'll just run a 5 why on why you were delayed or why you weren't ready to start. And pretty soon we realized it just goes back in a circle. And one isn't ready and the next one's not ready, or the one's working in a place he wanted a bigger area, or one's not prepared, so he worked wherever it was convenient. And pretty soon you're just in this no flow circle where you're nobody knows what to prepare for. Nobody's committed to prepare in the right sequence. They can't visualize the flow of the project. Everybody's just working to their own beat.
Yeah. One little change, I think, if you don't have a very clear vision of who needs to be where and when, this no flow circle manifests itself very quickly, and I'd say it gets much bigger. It just starts to snowball.
Yeah, it sucks everybody in once it starts. So when it ended up in a circle, we thought, well, this is really pretty representative of what happens with there's kind of like a vortex. Everybody gets pulled into just fighting for themselves.
Yeah, and it happens when the construction manager, us, we don't manage the job properly.
Yeah.
And communicate that management strategy clearly.
Right.
So tell me about this slide a little bit. Old Herbie up front leading the hype.
Well, exactly what you said is how do we fight this no flow circle? And the normal response for a superintendent is to try to stand in the middle of it and be traffic cop, to answer every question and direct everybody on the project. And each morning's a new day and a new fight. And he really, without wanting to becomes the bottleneck, because everyone wants to come to him and he can't possibly keep up with it. And so the theory of constraints fable of the manager trying to figure out what to do with a manufacturing plant goes on a Boy Scout hike, and the boy with the biggest pack is Herbie. And of course, they wait for him. He's always the bottleneck, always holding everybody up. But after they take part of his food and stuff out and distribute it amongst the boys and let Herbie set the pace, which exemplifies the theory of constraints, we're subordinating everybody to the bottleneck. And he becomes the solution. So superintendents and our project management, we have to distribute the load of managing daily activities with the trade partners. And to do that, of course, you have to bring the trade partners in on understanding flow and being able to work together. And the whole lean and last planner concept is aimed at that.
Yeah, and decentralized execution, I think, is the only way to go forward.
Right.
I'm a fan of decentralized planning, decentralized execution, with good supervision and oversight, of course. I mean, you absolutely do not want a free for all. But you're right. You have to have smart, intelligent management, informed management that empowers and enables decentralized planning and execution.
Right.
I agree with that.
And
all right, so next one. So the kind of solution here, you know, I've certainly heard the term tact a little bit, Wayne. And for those of you who don't know what it means, you know, I hate for this to become just a buzzword that people throw at management and say, oh yeah, just, you know, throw tact at it. But from where I see this is a proven principle that's existed in manufacturing for forever. You know, it's part of the reason manufacturing is been able to leave construction in the dust in terms of productivity. And it's really just a pretty simple thing. There's nothing fancy about it. But from your perspective, Wayne, what does it mean to you?
well, you know, it's the basic, and you're right. It's a very popular term now. 10, 15 years ago, it was not. It was talked about, but difficult to apply in construction. And in some ways, I think the last planner focused on breaking down the barriers, bringing everybody in on the solution, getting the last planner himself in on making decisions was a huge step forward. But it's difficult to focus or allow everybody to just vote on what the most critical thing is. And basically what it gets down to is flow. If they don't understand flow, and initially lean, the concept had flow as a separate term, and I think Modig and Ostrom did a great term with the two efficiencies that they defined, that that really is two flows Shingo defined as process and operation. So tact time works so well if everybody understands that there's two flows and everybody's going to the same beat, and the handoffs have to go both directions. Then the last planners have a framework that they can work in, making their commitments, the preparations, and they understand where everybody's going, and we're all getting there together.
Right.
And the beat, the tact time beat, then everybody understands that, and it becomes pretty obvious.
So we're leveraging the concept of tact as, you know, tact is not a means to an end of itself. Tact is a means to achieve flow on a project.
Exactly.
Excellent. Okay. And it should, and I agree. I mean, I've written about this in the past, where on a project we should be, let's make music and not noise. You know, unstructured beats and sounds are it's just noise, but when you add structure to that, it becomes music. And so let's make music, not noise.
Absolutely. And it gets pretty noisy if you don't.
That's right. So tell us how you do this. So, you know, Wayne, you've seen this, you've been practicing this since the 60s and 70s. You've certainly been a student of creating flow on projects. and you started a platform, a software platform around this idea of creating flow from a steady rhythm to a project based on two-way handoffs. So tell us a little about ClearFlow Matrix, and tell us, I understand you've been piloting this with TouchPlan to see how we can work together. Walk us through that a little bit.
So the matrix there, and Bon, we'll get into a little more detail of it in the next slide. But basically, they're pacemaker activities across the top, making each column that represent process flow, and vertically are areas that represent operations flow. So the pacemakers go down from area to area, and the handoffs from one pacemaker, one trade partner to the next go horizontally. So it's based on two flows, and the yellow squares, by doing it this way, consistent with Shingo's definition of both flows being perpendicular, you get the balanced production front. Again, we'll talk about that more in just a minute. But it fits any, or the reason it fits with TouchPlan so well is it's such a convenient way to identify the communication and the commitments that each trade partner are making. So it allows for more detail, easier updates, and as discussions change, you move back and forth. And we're using it currently on a multifamily project here in Austin. And so the little highlighted pacemaker is third floor wall framing, and it's also highlighted. It's a little hard to see across the top. So we're using the pacemakers as a swim lane basically of their own, right above the day-to-day activities and tickets that each trade partner is committing to. And it's working very well. So you've got a lot of detailed communication, but always based on the two flows in the matrix.
Got it. So you're using the matrix as sort of your guiding principle, as your framework, and then you're getting much more detailed in TouchPlan, and then tying that, making sure that still aligns back with what you've built in the matrix.
Right.
And I think that's something we do at TouchPlan quite well, is we capture the chaos really well. I mean, you look at some of these projects, there's just sticky notes all over the place, and that's fine because it has to be first captured so it can be managed. But partnering with ClearFlow Matrix takes you to the next step, to where you can start to add more structure to what you've captured in our planning and TouchPlan.
Right. And you have a framework to start with, and it's like giving somebody a blank sheet of paper. It's just hard to know where to start.
Yep. Exactly. Okay, so we have four kind of main platforms here for really like four requirements, I would say, on a project. Your master schedule, which is always most every owner. I've run into maybe one or two that don't require some form of master schedule within their Div 1 specs, whether that be P6, Microsoft project, whatever it is. That they want that XER file for as a document of record. Then we have phase scheduling, which what we just talked about with the higher level, more framework type approach to the project. You've got your look ahead planning, which is the very detailed day-to-day, trade-to-trade, area by area. But ultimately, that sort of starts with what we have there in the top left corner, with just defining areas of work on a project and making it visual for everyone to understand exactly where it is we're talking about. And as a superintendent is building this, especially this phase scheduling plan, you have to start with a set of drawings, and you have to take an initial estimate at what each area, level of effort required for each area. It sounds like this is a process that you've instilled at Lott Brothers. You tell us a little bit more about how your superintendents are doing this.
Yeah, we don't have a single scheduler working for us, and never have. And we built I guess now 7 or 8 million square feet of hospitals in 7 states, and build extremely fast and with good quality. And when we began to work out of town, I realized I grew up understanding smaller pieces, smaller crews, smaller handoffs. And I used to get into some squabbles with our older superintendents that I wanted to move somebody in on the preceding subcontractor into a space a little quicker than he wanted to, because everybody gets used to, wants to slow down, don't crowd the handoffs. The handoffs are scary to people. They want to really minimize it, and very much what Shingo fought with, like we talked about the schedule, the single motion exchange of dies. The handoffs is what you want. The natural tendency is to overproduce and minimize the number of handoffs. And that's what this doesn't let people do. And so when we were working out of town, I had to come up with something. I couldn't be there every day, something that I could show people, this is what you got to plan for. The first versions I condensed down to this was in the old days, we didn't have all the technology. I put the matrix on one side of an index card and everybody's phone number on the other side of an index card. And that became the scheduling tool. You know, you're supposed to be here every day or every week. You had the handoff come in and here's everybody's phone number to call if they're not there. And I could control a lot of work, and everybody, we knew where everybody was supposed to be each week. It was not, you know, it worked. Out of town, new people. So we put it together as a framework very early, the master schedule, and it fits the last planner. We did the first lean project in 2010, a hospital with Kristen Hill and Universal Health, Bill Seed, and we used it very successfully there. But the master schedule, you have the major milestone dates, the longer red lines are the pacemakers. So they're not broken down into each area. So you end up with a 30-page document. You can see the whole master schedule on one page. Then the breakdown of the pacemakers is in the matrix format. So it's condensed. Everybody can see where they are. And I'll show you a little more how to use it week to week. But that gets everybody, so there's dates to finish every area for all the pacemakers. Then for more detail, use either a Gantt chart or a calendar or whatever the handiest tool is for actual look ahead schedules for weekly, more detailed breakdown, which is exactly where TouchPlan is a huge asset. And then the nice thing is, so many people now, to get the real home office backup and commitment, they're calling into our meetings. So now with the technology, everybody can see and participate with the adjustments made on the project and can see it. And again, we have the 2 flows, the matrix, and then we go to a look ahead detail on TouchPlan, and it just has worked great.
Excellent. And Wayne, quick question on this. I've always been curious, I never really did sort of this TAC planning on a project. I certainly wish I maybe would have. But for that markup you have in the top left corner where you're showing Area 1 West and Area 2 East, are your superintendents physically marking those areas on the job site and clearly defining them, so that way it's, hey, electrician, you shouldn't be anywhere outside of Area 2 East, and that's marked with purple spray paint on the studs. Hey, are you using any visuals in the field to delineate those areas?
We have at times, normally we try to pick the areas, hallways, something that just not out in the middle of nowhere that delineates the space. And it works out well because, you know, there's different type of work in different areas. And usually there's a hallway or something just delineating it, and it works out very easy. And then we have the matrix and the areas marked out on a sheet, usually 11 by 17 laminated with the matrix on one side and the areas marked out so everybody can see where they are when they're walking around.
Yeah.
And it's very, it works well in planning. We actually, once the subcontractors understand what's happening, we've had really good luck with them negotiating the sequence of the handoff areas. If I could go from this area to this area and then back, and if it works out for everybody, it actually levels out their manpower.
Yeah.
And they can see it as they prepare the matrix. But yeah, it has to be highlighted and distinguished or people get confused.
And that's actually, let me go back to this next slide. That really does a good segue into this next slide. And you're probably asking, well, how the heck, what is this workflow actually supposed to look like? And I'd say, look, as you're looking at the project, start with ClearFlow Matrix. Start with that high level outline. Build that first, what we typically call phase planning, but do it in a block sort of structure. I think ClearFlow Matrix really does that well. Then detail it in touch plan. Validate it with your trade contractors. Once everybody's cool with it, then if you have to report on a master schedule, if you have to feed the owner that XER file, great. Export from touch plan into your master schedule, and away you go. Exactly, yeah, nice and easy there. And this is definitely a circle can go two ways, I would say, but it really should end up going clockwise, where you start with your high level and do that in the matrix. We can do high level and touch plan, but if you're really looking at a tact approach, I definitely recommend incorporating ClearFlow Matrix into your workflow. And the next thing I was really thinking about is when you're doing that detailed planning, one thing that we do in touch plan that I absolutely loved was being able to very quickly understand resource leveling. So you're saying, in the past slide where you had a subcontractor who tried to maybe needed to change a thing around or two so that way they could maintain a steady crew size throughout the project, because you don't want to demobilize and mobilize people and start creating a dispatching dilemma. What you can do in touch plan as you're both doing detailed planning and validating with the trades is use that crew size feature at the top. That should be in every meeting, where before you walk away, you've looked at, when you have your plan built, you've looked at the crew size planner to understand your resource allocation. So if you see massive spikes in manpower and then sudden cliffs, as you demobilize out of an area for even a day or two, you don't have a level production flow built into your plan. So I wanted to throw that out there because that is such a big component of every job. No one wants a trade contractor to demobilize because they're either waiting on work or because they're waiting on work.
Right.
So here's the matrix. Tell me, there's a bit of science here too, Wayne, where you can attempt to really actually understand throughput time and takt time and do a little bit of quantitative analysis. Maybe walk us through that a little bit.
Yeah, and like I said, when we put it together, it was strictly to follow old school construction processes, but it fits so well with lean, and it should, because both of them, the old schools, small crews working through a project and managing production, is exactly the flows and is exactly the lean concept. So it, usually construction is presented as being behind in lean and flow and manufacturing techniques. From my perspective, we were construction, well-run construction projects were ahead of the manufacturing because we couldn't overproduce and build up big inventories. There was no place to put them. We had the job. We had to flow from one area to the next area. We had to size our crews for what we were doing. And we lost a lot of that in the 80s, but I think the lean concepts that are more having come back to the old school. So, but in current terms, the flows, Shingo said it in his book and studying both Toyota and other manufacturers, that there's two flows, and he says that they are perpendicular in relationship. And that is really hard to get away from our Gantt charts. But if you go with the two flows as your first priority in presenting the project, then the two flows and the relationships take over, and then the horizontal, the diagonal, the current week becomes the balanced production front. And that's if you either own it or you're not. The red is not started and should have. The yellow we use as it started but not complete. And so flow efficiency goes horizontally. Resource efficiency is vertical. So the resource efficiency, the operations flow is the subcontractor, trade partners, crew sizes, and it goes from area to area. And most of them, we have written more notices to subcontractors to stop them from over manning the project and sending too many people. They think they can just, once they get on, they can just run over everybody and get way ahead. And it's so obvious, especially in multifamily, where the framer goes out and frames all the buildings, but nobody's behind him moving in to see if there's mistakes. And then you can't get them back. And it looks good and gives everybody like, oh man, a lot going on, but you can't finish anything. Then the process flow, like I said, the handoffs are hard. So you make smaller crews, stay with the handoffs, but you're forcing people to start actually earlier. Because if you just go with the big crews, then you let the framers get way ahead, you bring other crews in later. And then everybody ends in the battle at the end. So, all the TAC publications say the same thing. We're all trying to avoid the same thing. But the handoffs, I think, looking at it as two flows, the process flow focusing on each handoff and preparing for it and making it a weekly norm so everybody knows you're going to make it this week. Even if there's some touching up or something, that communication is there to handle and can be handled with all the task management systems. But the weekly handle, the weekly flow, the weekly tact handoff with both flows, both areas, really begins to pay off. And it's easier to see in this with the matrix. So each cell is a week. That each cell is your tact time. And then one area completing is the throughput time. And usually that throughput time, as we put this together, is really comfortable for finishing one area. And the first one we put together was 10,000 square feet to finish out in 16 weeks, almost 4 months. And nobody's afraid of that. But then if you begin to get intact and you go week to week to week, then the Little's law effect takes over. You get more people working quicker, different not the crew sizes, but more crafts, more trade partners moving in earlier, and you begin to have the Little's Law effect where once you finish one, you finish next one next week, next one next week. And we finished large hospital projects very fast, very much faster than anybody else does. And it's all based on Little's Law and the tack time and the flows and the handoffs. So it's all very clearly presented. That is you can find it in the Gantt charts, but it's not as clear as what this one. Maybe that's why we call it the clear flow matrix.
Yeah, and on this plane, so and help me make sure I understand what I'm looking at here, and I think y'all can see my mouse maybe, but that second row, when it's, let's say kitchen and dining is your area, you've got 4 cells that are red. Is that telling me that we're 4 weeks behind?
It is exactly that. And you're not trying to convert to percentage or any of that kind of stuff. That's the 4 weeks. And this was a real project. I've forgotten exactly what. Oh, it was rehab hospital that we did. And the kitchens are always difficult. So there's 2 schools of thought. You want to put them at the end so they don't hold everybody else up. But the other side, you want to start them early so that you have time to take care of the issues. So that one is stuck at sheetrocking and cover up and tape and float. And the tape and float's holding off because probably there's issues with the sheetrock. And so they begin to get behind, but we're not trying to calculate it. This project would look percent complete wise is probably perfectly on schedule because you've got so many of the earlier crafts finished, partial percentages, but this shows that area is 4 weeks behind and you can take action to deal with that.
Right. Yep. You're finished. That and that. And so it's giving you a warning that, hey, this is maybe not showing critical path on your master schedule right now, but it's going to very quickly. You might have had float in that area, but you get bad news much more quickly, I think, doing it this way.
Right. And GoRat wrote a book, Critical Chain, about project management. And I think most trains of thought are that a critical path is pretty fictitious. It changes depending on who's ahead or who's behind. When I was in school, I interviewed project managers on large work, and some of the superintendents said he used critical path because every week he'd get a new report, and whoever was on the critical path had to hurry up and get off. So
Right.
the next week he wouldn't be on the critical path. And
That's
that was
right.
their management tool.
Yeah.
So,
And it becomes cyclical. I mean, that's how you start the no flow circle, I think. I mean, that is
absolutely.
exactly where the no flow circle starts is lighting a fire under the critical path, but you're ultimately starting a bunch of fires in different places, and putting yourself in a position where as the manager, you're the bottleneck because everyone else is waiting on information or your management. You totally take away the ability for decentralized execution.
Right. Absolutely.
Okay, so now question on this, Wayne. I mean, you're 4 weeks behind on something like this. How do you make that up? What do you do? I mean, the old school way is, all right, let's throw a bunch of people at it. You send your trade contractor a notice saying, hey, you don't have enough people here. You're behind production. But what's the right way, and what have y'all done at Lot Brothers to make up something like this if you see 4 weeks behind in a particular area with a particular trade?
Well, first you've got to find out what the problem was. I'm sure, quite often it's a design or an RFI or difficulty getting one particular piece of equipment or whatever they're looking for. And so they may have had to back up, and especially in the kitchen area, you're going to have, that's pretty common to have issues. And so first of all, you don't panic. You're working one area. You can get people in to catch up any of these pacemakers and focus on those. But the nice thing about it, you're not hiding that area is behind in percent complete and 30-page report. You see it, you focus on it, and you gradually catch it up over time. You can bring 2 crews of sheetrockers in, tape and float, use some quick set mud, get more people in for that. You can get the areas caught up, but the nice thing is it highlights the issue so you have time to take care of it before it gets to be crucial.
Yep. Yeah, bad news early is good news.
Absolutely.
Great. Okay, so I think we talked about that balanced production front. We maybe didn't quite switch over to this slide quickly enough, but maybe you mentioned Shingo talking about you got process on top and then production on the bottom. I forget exactly, or operations and process flow. Maybe hit on that really quickly just to bring that home.
Oh yeah, and it's when we first, I have to admit, we done research after we'd already used the matrix for so long. So it's kind of nice to see, oh, well, that's why it works so well, or yeah, we fit. And so, but it's really rewarding to see how well it does fit. And so the 2 flows being perpendicular, orthogonal, that my brother likes to call it, that way you're looking at balancing the 2 at right angles. And so the relationship is what's perpendicular, obviously, and one has to flow at its pace. You have to balance its pace with the other pace, and the handoffs is where it all happens. So process flow is the handoff from trade partner to trade partner, process to process. Operations flow is a single operation, a single craft, a single, like we call it, pacemaker, because there may be 1 or 2 smaller crafts that are in and out as part of a pacemaker, but that's the actual men on site finishing one area, going to the next area, going to the next area. So that's operations flow. And the real key to it is realizing that same flow, the same operations flow, has to be dealt with each week. And so every week, each trade partner has to hand off his area, the green area in the blow up, process flow horizontally. So he has to move out of his area, finish his area, which is crucial, and sell it to the incoming craft. At the same time, he's got to prepare and move down to his next area. So process flow and operations flow meet every week at each trade partner. And that's crucial for them to understand, and it makes accountability between trade partners so easy. So we don't want to walk and punch that item. The incoming trade partner provides his list of what's not finished, walks that area rather than us. And they hold each other accountable each week for making these handoffs. So that's the real thing, the key that makes it all work is understanding the 2 flows, understanding the handoffs, and what each craft is trying to do, which we used to in the 60s and before. The crafts, you didn't have huge crews. You had smaller crews. They understood to get the next trade in as quick as they could. And everybody worked on production, and the balanced production front was natural.
And so you're talking about that sale, that 2-way move in, move out. I mean, every time you finish an area, you have to do 2 things. You have to move out of the area you're in, and then you have to move in to your next area. And you've got some bullet points here that are showing the things that you have to do beforehand. Is this something you formalized on your projects and collaborated with your trade contractors to do and say, hey, look, we either have a form or just a sort of verbal, mutually understood process that we've trained into our trade contractors to do this every time, once a week, when we move out of an area and move into another area?
Absolutely. And so the move out, it's the same person, same foreman, last planner, trade partner that is performing both of these tasks. And we called it our single motion exchange of trades, which is a takeoff on Shingo's single motion exchange of dies, where companies were overproducing because they didn't want to go back and change the dies in this big stamp press machine. And it would sometimes take hours. They'd have to schedule it for a weekend or something. So they'd produce extra to hide or to buffer for that changeover. And his big thing was, let's focus on that. And he got it down to minutes and sometimes seconds. And you've got a great story of the exercise you did in manufacturing that, how it really works. So we've come up with this to really encourage everybody to focus and get ready to move out. I know that you've got to move out and sell it to this incoming trade partner, and you have to get the bold there, new craft accept. That's where the real rubber meets the road. When you get everybody on board, because it's so easy to just ignore it, just kind of keep moving along, hope nobody does it. But once you get everybody on board as a team together, it really pays. Then the same man, and we do a PDCA at the end of every handoff, but he also now, and this is where Shingo made time up, is being prepared to move in. So now he has little 10,000, whatever next area to move into. He needs to go get his material that's already on site, but pull it, get it close, get the off-site material deliveries, get the home office, get their trucks out there so you've got the material on site. And the detailing, this is something we teach our engineers. We don't want them scheduling. We don't want them working on details. We need pictures, diagrams. Submittals is the key to getting all this done, but it's also not the end of the effort. You get that done, but you study the submittals, make sure it works. Get the details out to everybody, both areas, specific handoffs, more detailed handoffs that have to be done, where exactly to start. And so that is a huge thing that we like to spend a lot of time on. And then, and do a lot of it for the trade partners. And then check the prefab, whatever you can prefab on site, which is prefabbing big units is fun, and it can pay off on large, extremely repetitive efforts. But the little things, a plumber puts together a few bins and a few traps and have them in a bucket so he's ready, is a huge asset. And then locate the equipment, be sure you've got the lifts and the cranes or whatever you need available, and then be ready to move in. So every Monday needs to be an event, ready to move.
And you're almost spending a day making sure that move in, move out process goes well. I mean, it might feel completely unproductive at the time you're going through this, but it looks like ultimately you're being more productive by taking the time to be careful about the area you move into, making sure that conditions of satisfaction have been met so you're not interrupting flow on the project. I mean, the project flow is allowing for this to happen if you manage it well. And basically say Monday is move in, move out day. It's okay if we don't make any production today because we are setting conditions to make a lot of production or make efficient production Tuesday through Friday.
Well, I wouldn't give them Monday. We usually don't give them Monday. We say, you need to know, I mean, the foreman needs to be preparing for the move.
Yeah.
Ahead of it happening. And the crews move pretty easily from just across the hall. And so it's not, it doesn't cost a day. It just needs, they just need to know it's coming and get geared up. And like you said at first, it really, they all make money if we can keep the flow going. The trade partners and contractors make money. They have smaller crews. They're not everybody leaving and coming back and the waste of getting started. And they like it.
Yeah. And so if I'm a superintendent at Lott Brothers, I would imagine if moving day is on Monday, I would imagine my Thursday would be mostly spent talking to my foreman and priming them for move in, move out.
Absolutely right. And we have a lot of our trade partner meetings on Thursday, and we call it the handoff meeting as well as the contractor meeting. And a lot of times we'll set it all up on boards and rollers and do it out on site. So that's the meeting. We're going to talk about who's ready, who's not, and the negotiation, you know, okay, I've got 2 rooms out of my whole area that I'm not quite done with. Can you start at this other end and I'll be out of the way by the time you get to me? Yeah, no problem. So that's the handoff. That's the PDCA, the handshake, and everybody moves through it. So yeah, and we should tell everybody, you and I did not talk about Thursdays before this. It's, you know, it's pretty obvious what you have to do, and you hit exactly what we do.
I like that. I like that a lot. And I think that actually brings us to, you know, just the commitment part, like you're saying. So that if we have commitments in TouchPlan, which one thing I think is really one of our strengths that we would partner with Clearflow Matrix in doing is tracking commitments and helping tell the story of the project. So you know how we do crew size, leveling and alignment in TouchPlan really well. We also do this commitment planning and tracking to where every week to week, like that Thursday meeting for you all, Wayne, you would at the end of that have promised in all your activities for the next week.
Right.
And
then I say, you see the smaller 1-day activities.
Yeah.
You don't need that detail early in the schedule during the look ahead. But once you get these handoffs started and you're getting down to the details, then people start saying, okay, I'll get out of here Wednesday and you can have it Thursday, or, you know, whatever we're doing, or I've got to have this part done to make it. And that's where, I mean, we've appreciated TouchPlan for years and years and years, and y'all, you know, have written Hal McComber, and y'all have had a lot of great discussions on TACT way before it got popular, and have really led the way for us in providing a tool that all the subcontractors and trade partners can make these personal commitments. And if you don't have a personal commitment from them, no amount of scheduling is going to fix that. So yeah, it's a powerful tool.
Yeah, that's right. And, you know, and it makes it visual, makes it clear to everybody, you know, in a detail level. The electrician knows exactly where they're supposed to be, you know, on down the line from the trade partners. So yeah, we're excited about this. I really think it's going to help add a bit more structure than what we've been able to really do in the past. You know, our standpoint here at TouchPlan is, you know, we love partnering with people who are providing real solutions to the industry, and we're excited about working with you, Wayne. So we'll go ahead and wrap up for questions. I don't know how I am on time. We're over time, but it's been a lot of fun talking to you. Sarah, I'll kick it back over to you. We'll field questions. I understand there's some people have to go. I do have some time here. I can stick around.
Yeah, so we did get a few questions that come in. And yeah, sorry all that we are over, but feel free to stick around. But worst case scenario, we will be sharing a recording of this, so you can always come back and watch the questions then. So Wayne and Andrew, how have you seen using construction planning software impact the trades in terms of their abilities to stay within their own expectations of the project?
At first, they'll overpromise every time.
Yeah.
You might have seen the same thing, Wayne. But they're not overpromising out of out of anything. So, it's just we all overestimate our abilities sometimes, and I think we look at any project, any new project, without totally considering all of the factors that are at play that are different from maybe a time in the past when we've produced at a particular rate. So I would say with construction planning software, if they're just starting, they are absolutely going to overpromise everything at the beginning, and you be really careful as a manager not to beat them over the head about it. If you look at it through that lens, you won't have hard conversations when they're missing promises. You'll have learning conversations. You'll be able to say, hey, look, I get it. You overpromised. Everyone does this at first. Let's get to something realistic.
Absolutely. And again, breaking it into smaller pieces and the matrix helps them see a little better. And with the matrix, we can put together a pretty detailed projection. And we did a multi-floor MOB and found up front, we just couldn't meet the owner's command or demand. And we had to build out all 3 floors simultaneously to meet it. And so, yeah, if you left up to just feelings, nobody wants to be the bad guy and say you can't do it.
And our last question, have you found that using technology has impacted your company's culture?
Absolutely. And now the touch plan and tools that you can use, everybody have access to it without being on site physically and updated so fast. I remember the first pull plan, we had so many stickies and tickets on the wall that I had colored yarn from the knitting store to try to connect everything together. And, touch plan is a great answer to that.
Yeah, I think being tech forward in general is always a good thing. And this isn't just coming from somebody who works for a software company. It's, we started digging ditches and trenches with shovels after we dug with our hands first and stones, and then we started using shovels, and we eventually graduated to trenchers and track hose. So I would say that software and technology are that next level tool that you bring as a manager. Wayne started with a 3x5 note card with phone numbers written on one side and his matrix on the other, and that worked great, and he was able to master it. But I think now these managers can do much more with a software platform.
Absolutely.
Well, that is it in terms of questions. Thank you all again for everyone who joined us today, and Wayne and Andrew for this great discussion. So thank you guys, and have a great rest of your week.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, y'all.